All right, let's get into our first discussion now. It's 22 days into the year, and already the rains are pouring in and flooding is imminent in some parts of the country.
Well, this is raising concerns among residents, especially as the National Emergency Management Agency projects that 20% out of Nigeria's estimated population of 198 million people are at risk of flooding across the country. In 2018 alone, more than 100 people died in floods, and the issue was declared a national disaster in Kogi, Niger, Anambra, Bayelsa, and Delta states. Well, to help cushion the impact of the flood as Nigeria approaches the rainy season, the DG, that's the Director General of NEMA, Mustafa Mehaja, says the agency has commenced moves to prevent continued recurrence of flood across the country. Well, we have Professor of Geography, University of Lagos, Alabi Shone, joining us for this discussion. And, of course, an environmentalist, Nimo Bassi, joins us via Skype from Benin, Edo State capital. Good morning, gentlemen. Good to have you on the show.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, let's begin with you right here, Prof, in the studio. This warning comes every year, and you still have a situation where the flood comes and Nigerians still suffer greatly. What exactly is going on? I mean, now we hear from the NEMA boss that, moves are being made to ensure preparedness, mitigation, and flood prevention mechanisms. How confident are you that NEMA really can deliver on this?
Well, this is our country, this is Nigeria. I think we will improve day in, day out. The rains are meant to come during the rainy season. Floods are meant to come, but it's not the problem that is really the issue. It is how we're able to manage it, and then now we get ourselves sorted out. We don't need to wait for the floods to come before we start taking care of our canals, our wastes. We've got the first rain of the year in 3 states now. I think Enugu, Cross River, and Lagos. Some parts of Lagos even had rain this morning. So these are sound warnings that, well, we have to get prepared. Definitely we can't do without flood, but even the advantages of the floods are there. So
Advantages of the flood?
Yes.
Really?
Wow.
For instance, the weather is cool now. It's been so hot for some days now.
So,
the mosquitoes are also
do we
coming.
see that as advantage of the rain or advantages of the flood?
Well, the floods to bring some sediments. I think I've said it many times before. Yeah. The farmers are waiting for the floodplain agriculture, what the Hausas call the fadamas, what we the Yorubas call the akuro farming for our vegetables and so on and so forth. If we don't have these floods, we won't have those wet alluvial soils that these plants will grow on. Many of our river basin authorities, the agricultural projects, the soils are so hard that the plants cannot even survive the harsh soil conditions. So if we don't have this flood coming to wet, increase the moisture content of the soil for the fertilizers to even decompose and then be consumed by the plant's roots and so on.
All right. Now, when it comes to the kind of flood we're experiencing now, it never used to be the norm, and yet we had very good agriculture at the time. But we'll come back to seeing the
good side of it.
The good side of it, like you put it, so we can understand. Let's bring in Nimo Bassi in here now. Now, you have been an advocate against climate change over the years, and as it is right now, it seems the reality of that is coming to bear with us here. But every year, like my colleague said earlier, we have these warnings ahead of the year, ahead of the rains, but nothing seems to be done. But this year, what is going to be different from what you are seeing?
I doubt if there will be anything different. The difference may be that the floods may be more than the previous years, because as you mentioned, climate change is not getting better; it's getting worse. We should never really be surprised about the challenges from rains and floods, because a city like Lagos, geographers, as our colleague in the studio would tell us, Lagos expects to have rain, at least one rain every month of the year. So there's no month you don't expect to have rain. So we should be ready at every time for possibility of flood. And now we're having more intense rain, so we're going to have a lot more water to contend with. The city is expanding at rates that may not, I doubt if it's controlled. Many of our cities are growing without plans. They're growing autonomously, so to speak, as people just expand and keep building. So you don't have measures that will help check the flood. As long as we don't have measures in place in terms of urban planning, in terms of development, in terms of chemical solid waste, the flood problems will be compounded.
Let me stay with you, Nimo Bassi. Our guest here in the studio, Professor Alabi, believes that there's a positive side to floods. I wonder whether you agree. I mean, is there a good way that we can actually turn this floods, yearly floods, to a positive use for us?
I think Prof was speaking in a specific context in terms of rivers overflowing their banks where you have agricultural land, not where people are living. If it's for farming, that is great. For gardening, that is great. We need the vegetables, we need the food. And of course, you know that a country like Egypt depends on flooding of the Nile, so that is important. But when it comes to urban centers where people are living, when there's so much, almost everywhere is built up in concrete, you have.
All right.
Okay.
I think.
Into the soil, okay, then you will have more problems.
All right, let's bring it back into the studio, Professor Shanae. This whole issue has been on, and I wonder what really are the factors that compound the situation we have on ground right now. Is it the issue of illiteracy, or maybe the population is growing so much that we can't handle the pressure it's putting on us?
Well, there are quite a number of factors, and the system is so complex that we are like in a cycle. One problem leads to the other, another one leads to the other, and so on and so forth. So we have the natural and then the ones that we actually put there on our own. We even compound the natural ones. For instance, like I said, the rains must come. He said that, well, we are having climate change, of course. And the simple definition we can have of this is that, well, we are having more rains. Not that the quantity of the rains, the falls are just more than what we used to have before, but the duration, what we used to have over 3-4 months before, will just come within about a month, about 2 months, and then water will definitely find its level. So the rains must come. The soils, we are exposing the soils. All those wetlands that used to be to serve as a buffer, a shock absorber, for the waters to stay for some time before the waters percolate or moves into the oceans, the seas. We are opening them up. Even from the urban perspectives, well, we just heard about the problem of planning. We build before we start thinking of the conveyance, the gutters, the canals. Even where you have the canals, some people just go there to block the canals with different kinds of structures. The policies are there. The laws are there. But the challenges we are having is that we find it very, very skeptical to actually implement to the later. In recent times, for instance, another perspective is that maybe people are even planning that there should be floods, there should be crises, so that they will use that as an opportunity to make some kind of gains. Different agencies, governmental, non-governmental, will let you know that they have spent X millions, X dollars, X pounds, naira to actually provide some relief materials, to provide some logistics for victims, pay compensations and all that. These are some of the figures cannot be verified.
Okay, so what you're saying, in other words, is just like war, some people cash in on that situation.
They even pray for it.
All right, let me take you to Nimo Bassi there in Benin. The NEMA boss, Mehaja, announced recently that the NEC, that's the National Economic Council, is actually planning or has agreed, for that a federal coordinative unit be set up to identify locations for critical actions as immediate double measures executable within a short time. What kind of measures really do you think should be in place to mitigate these floods, because they really are going to come?
What is being planned for should have been done many years ago, but it's never too late to do the right thing. And so now, the things to be done are complex, but first of all, we need to have adequate monitoring centers that actually tell us in advance. This could be set up in the ministry, the relevant institutions or the universities that would actually monitor the weather patterns and be able to make a direct and very precise weather forecast for different parts of our cities and communities, so that people can be ready for what is coming. The second, this don't need to be manned manually. Some could be automated. But I think one of the major things to be done would be interministerial, not just one office handling it, because they affect almost everybody. The Ministry of Works, the lands, and all the rest, they need to work together. The Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Health, because people need to be able to get prepared for the responses, in terms of health impacts and all that. So again, I go back to the issue of planning. We just have to take a look at our cities and communities, whether they're in the villages or in the urban areas. There should be a measure of planning that is actually not just on paper, but is implemented. Otherwise, you're going, no matter how many mechanisms you set up, no matter how many centers you set up to predict the weather patterns, if there are no ways to handle the flood, then that will still be a problem. And a flood should not just be challenged to rivers and to the ocean. We have to find a way of deciding maintaining, or rather filtering out toxic waste that go into the water bodies, because fisher folks are right there in the lagoon, they're in the river, they're in the ocean, they're catching fish, and if you pump toxic waste into the lagoon, you are poisoning our people. So it's a complex thing, and it needs to be done holistically.
All right, yeah, Reverend Bassi, let me stay with you on this. Now, the projections are that urbanization is going to increase. In fact, it's increasing at a very alarming rate. And when it comes to the institutions that should plan ahead, you use the word planning, the plan ahead and give us a structured kind of urban system where the residents and all of that is factored in. Do you think we have the kind of strong institutions that would handle that kind of planning, or you think that Nigeria needs maybe an external intervention?
No, we don't need external intervention. What we need is leadership with vision. Our cities don't need to grow the way they are growing. Our cities are growing this way because people don't find employment opportunities in rural settings. If the investment in rural area, not just abandoning, our villages are dying. Just drive to the villages and see that you don't find new things opening up. Let's have institutions, let's have factories in the villages, let's have hospitals, let's have schools, let there be proper, let there be roads to the communities. And then you find that people would not need to live choked up in cities. People will live healthier lives in the communities, and then the stress on the urban centers will be reduced. And this will help in these issues, in this question.
Okay. All right, Professor Alabi, yes, you just talked about rural-urban drift that could, be adding a lot of pressure, especially for cities like Lagos, 20 million and still counting. Let's look at the role of public enlightenment, how much this, can help. I mean, if you go around Lagos, sometimes on the street where I live, let me bring it down home, you can't even count one tree. And it's something that always baffles me. I mean, because, like we always say, every time we have to discuss this. In primary school, nursery school, secondary school, you're taught that, humans rely on trees to get oxygen, and the trees take carbon dioxide and other. The cycle continues. Yes, and the cycle of life, continues. Now, indiscriminate felling of trees, and then we don't have. We've had a number of tree planting, programs in the past that ended, flat on their faces. How do we bring it home to the ordinary man on the street? How important it is for you to have that tree, that one tree, that can make a lot of difference. Imagine if on a street of about 50 houses, each person has a tree, in front of the building.
That would be very, very interesting. Like the Reverend said, it takes a leadership with vision to take such a step, but also the followership also needs to be ready. We are now in an era that we hardly believe anything from anywhere, but quite interesting. The social media, the mass media, they've been doing quite a lot. This kind of program, like that is on here now, a lot of things on our WhatsApp messages, text messages, Skype, and all that. So I think there has been a very, very interesting aspect of that, and is one of the key areas that we can actually fall into and
should it be backed by legislation and the building codes, the town planning, and all of that?
I think we have that already. For instance, there is a law that says for your compound, there is a particular percentage that you have to leave without concrete, so that the green area, so that it could even be bare, so that when the rain falls, at least there will be some part of the runoff that will percolate into the soil. But what you see nowadays is that everywhere is concretized, and then as the waters are coming directly from the sky, they land on the concrete. The ones on the roof, they drop, and everything goes into the gutter at the same time. Every house has its runoff moving into the gutter. And the gutters, they have their conveyance capacity. Unfortunately, too, many of the gutters are so, they are not properly taken care of. You have sediments, you have a lot of refuse, plastics, nylon bags blocking here and there. So if the legislation is very good, in fact there are existing laws already that for every tree you cut down, you must find a way of replacing that.
All right. Let me stay with you, Professor. We had this ecological funds that states are supposed to access and all governments are supposed to access, but sometimes the funds are deployed only when there's a disaster already. When we have a projection like this, is it not meant to, by taking preventive measures, shouldn't that fund be activated in such kind of ways in order to even prevent any kind of disaster?
Well, that's the way it should be, but you agree with me that a major challenge we have in terms of our administration generally is continuity. A government comes today with its lofty ideas, another one comes and starts all over again. So, in particular, when the ecological fund idea came up, what I think the Federal Minister of Environment, then FEPA, did was to go to almost every state of the Federation to do what they call, to establish what they call state environmental protection agencies. Many of these have now metamorphosized into ministries of environment. And the first exercise was to document the ecological problems of each state and the possible solutions. So this was supposed to be done in phases. I'm talking about 1996, 1997. But since then, it seems everybody went to sleep. And the issue of the ecological fund, we hear figures here day in, day out, in the newspapers, or the TVs, in the radios.
In billions.
Of what they use this money for. They are hardly channels to what they are hardly channeled to what they are actually planned to be channeled.
Nimo, I'm sure you have something to say about the ecological fund, which is a very, very important aspect if we're going to actually mitigate the challenges both of climate change, the flooding that we experience every year and all of that. But to speak to the issue I raised with our guests here, the issue of public enlightenment, bringing it home to the individual on what to do, in their little space to ensure that this cycle of flooding is reduced, to the barest minimum.
Well, I think this cannot be overemphasized. The public needs to have more conversations on what actions individuals can take to address the issue of flooding. And as the Prof has said, the issue of tree planting is very important because for many reasons, if people have walkways in our cities and their trees provide shade, people can go from place to place on foot. They don't have to use the car. That is also compounding the problems. But when it comes to, you cannot overemphasize that. I believe also that policies have to be coherent, so you have all the ministries working together, and And the settings of the public institutions, the secretariat, should show by example. Schools should be example places where you could actually see green environments. But these days, with so many private schools popping up here and there, some don't even have playgrounds for children. And where they have little playgrounds, they are covered with concrete. So we're having this issue of having to reorientate ourselves in terms of landscaping. We need to have more soft landscaping, not just cementify, if there's a word like that, everywhere. So we need to do less hard landscaping, more of soft landscape, where you have lawns, grass, trees, shrubs. This also aids healthy living in our society. In terms of ecological fund, unfortunately, or fortunately, in one sense, we're seeing a lot of utilization.
Okay. All right, Reverend Mobasi.
It's all about this.
Okay, we have to leave you here now. Reverend Mobasi, environmentalist, thank you very much for joining us on the program this morning. And Professor Alabishone, we'll still have you with us here in the studio. Let's take the time for the news update, and then we come back to dwell more on this. Stay with us.
Bring you the news update. The meeting between the federal government and the Academic Staff Union of Universities again ended in a deadlock.
Yeah, this is coming 2 weeks after a similar one failed to reach an agreement. It looked like the issues at stake will be resolved when Labour Minister Chris Ngige said he had been directed by President Muhammadu Buhari to, quote, pass the night here until all issues that have kept children away from schools are resolved and the strike called off, end of quote. But both parties couldn't reach an agreement and the strike continues. Meanwhile, ASU President Professor Biono Ogunyemi says institutions that pulled out of the ongoing strike due to pressure from their vice-chancellors or governing councils would regret their actions in the future.
And since the union commenced its nationwide strike on November 5, 2018, at least 6 universities have pulled out of it and opened their doors to students. The Acting Inspector General of Police, Muhammad Adamu, has decentralized the operation of the Federal Special Anti-Robbery Squad. FSAS will no longer be controlled from Abuja, but will now be commanded by state police commissioners in their locations.
Yeah, the acting IGP also scrapped 2 other police squads and created a special election investigation team. This is part of the strategies being put in place by the police to ensure security before, during, and after the polls next month.
And the Court of Appeal in Abuja has fixed the 24th of January to hear a motion filed by the Chief Justice of Nigeria, Walter Onoren, seeking to restrain the Code of Conduct Tribunal from trying him. And counsel to the CJN had filed an appeal challenging the decision of the tribunal, which adjourned the trial to January 22.
And the Chief Justice is also challenging the CCT's admission of the federal government's motion, asking him to step down from his position pending the determination of the petition. All right, away from Nigeria now, President Emerson Mnangagwa of Zimbabwe has cancelled a trip to Europe after violent protests in his country.
The president was slated to attend the Davos Economic Summit, where he was expected to seek investment for Zimbabwe. Ministers say the opposition movement for democratic change, that's the MDC, is using sharp fuel price increases as a pretext for violence, while the latter accuses the authorities of a brutal crackdown. Rights groups say at least 12 people have been killed in protests that erupted after the president announced a steep increase in the fuel price over a week ago. And still away from Nigeria, no fewer than 100 members of Afghanistan security forces were killed when Taliban insurgents attacked a military compound in the central Maidan Wardak province on Monday.
Yeah, a senior defense ministry official put the death toll at 126, but a provincial official says more than 100 persons were killed. The government had earlier said 12 people were killed at the military training center. The Taliban has claimed responsibility for the attack.
Okay, it's time to hand it over now to sports very quickly. Chidebere Ezani is standing by.
Many thanks, Ngozi. Now, the 2018-2019 Nigeria Professional Football League season has so far been marred with the violence that seemed to happen in one venue or the other. Now, how safe are these games for journalists who go to these venues to do their jobs? Joining me this morning via Skype is Modo Victor, a sports photographer, photojournalist who takes his time to visit most of these venues. Good morning, Victor.
Good morning, Chidebe.
Now, in week one, we saw a fight erupt after Abia Warriors took a point from Plateau United. 2 days ago, we saw another one at Remo Stars, and it seems like it's an ongoing situation. Now, you go to cover these games, and most times you're on the pitch side for your images. Do you fear for your safety when you go for this game?
First of all, I'll say that when you're faced with mob action, a lot of indices do not particularly align. But when I'm pitch side, personally taking pictures of matches and violence erupt, my first concern is for reportage, get 1 or 2 shots off to ensure that I can correctly report what happened at the stadium, and then find a way to make my camera as invisible as possible to avoid having aggression transferred in my general direction, because I still like my head and I still like my equipment. But most times the violence is directed, at least the little we have seen this season, is either directed towards the referees or serious aggression towards the opposing team. So before a journalist gets into the mix, you have to be like so close to the action, so close to where it's happening to get into the mix. And in my case, I use a 400mm lens, so I can be at the other side of the pitch or the other side of the stand totally and get clear images of the violence going on. So I am as far away from the action as possible.
Okay, now having covered some tournaments, both nationally and internationally, what is the LMC missing when it comes to security? That, you know, the NPFL is losing grounds very fast because fans are scared to go to the stadium, journalists are scared to cover the games. Now, what is the LMC missing in getting security right for us?
I think the major thing will be getting the, if I would say, club owners to really commit to put action behind their words when they talk about violence at the stadium, to put action behind their words, and proper security apparatus. Give a clear example was Remo Stars. Remo Stars had policemen on duty. They even bandaged a banner saying beat the referee, kill the game. But when aggression started rising, the way into their tunnel is not barricaded by high nets and all. So when the aggression was building up and people tried to get to the referees on the pitch, their security apparatus actually tried to ensure that no one touched the referee going in, despite some people trying. But when they were trying to pass into the tunnel, people threw missiles down. That's what about bottles filled with water and stuff, and it happened to connect with one of the referees, giving him serious injury. So if we really want to see an end to this violence, personally, I ask that the owners of these clubs, the administrators, put actions behind words and show, because most times someone said something and I quite agree with the person. Those that really foment trouble at the stadium, those that start the problem, are not necessarily those that pay to come into the stadium. It's those that believe that they own the stadium, that they are part of the club, they have to enter free, and they are always fighting in their own personal opinion for the club's best interest. They are the biggest some of them call themselves supporters clubs. They are the biggest problems facing any MPFL club when it comes to the issue of violence in the stadium. Those people have to be disbanded or sent to a well-barricaded area of the stadium, totally away from where they can get interfere with the action or interfere with the match officials. All right. And then my personal favorite, get dogs to the stadium. People respect dogs.
All right. Thank you very much, Victor, for your time this morning. We're very grateful.
Thank you.
Well, that's it from us. We hope for better safety when it comes to Nigerian football to help develop the game to the level we want it to be. I am Chidebere Ezani. Up next is weather forecast of major cities across Nigeria. The breakfast show will continue right after.
All right, we're still talking about the projections for the year 2019 when it comes to the report that says about 40 million Nigerians are at risk of flooding this year, and that's by NEMA. And we've been dissecting this issue with Professor of Geography, University of Lagos, Professor Alabi Shoneye has been with us in the studio. We spoke earlier too with Reverend Nimo Bassi, an environmentalist. Now, Professor, let's come to these issues. With all of the issues we've analyzed, what scenarios can likely play out going into the year? Well,
the Boy Scouts will say,
be prepared always.
Be prepared always. Always be prepared. Fortunately, we're not going to be having serious rains that will be giving us floods, serious floods, until sometimes in June, July. The first rains we are having now, many of the rains are actually isolated. It probably will be raining here in Shagisha, and it doesn't get to Ikeja, or it will be raining in Maryland, it will not get to Yaba. But definitely all the waters will still go into the canal. We're going to go back into the heat very soon, probably in the next week or thereabouts, and that will continue like that until about April, May, when the rain starts coming. We have quite a long rope.
So we have some time to prepare.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay, it's interesting because on Sunday, when when the heavens, expanded and poured down rain on Lagos, for example, in the Ogudu area, there were flash floods already, and like you said, the rains have not even started. So if we're experiencing that now, you wonder what will happen when the rainy season is fully here. 2012 remains indelible in the memory of Nigerians, what happened across the country, with flooding. Do you think we've learned any lessons from that experience at all?
Not that we didn't learn anything, but we always learn through the hard ways. We know the areas that are highly susceptible to these problems. At least the major rivers, especially where they are passing through the highly populated areas. Whether we like it or not, those dams will release water either for consumption downstream or at least to make sure that they secure their facilities. They don't want the dams breaking and then leading to more catastrophes and all that. So we definitely know these things are coming. And day in, day out, we have victims. Day in, day out, we even record the losses of properties, sometimes lives. And so normally we are supposed to have known when these things are coming. Unfortunately enough, we have the agencies that are now doing better predictions.
Yes.
Their predictions may not be 100%, but once you are told that this is happening, we just have to get ready.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what's the use of the predictions if, concrete actions will not be taken to mitigate this
for the agencies, they have to do their own, and then the government is left to
do its own. Yeah.
All right, Professor Alabi Shoneye, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.